30 days, Madison Reed said, her smile bright enough to hide the insult. Pick any Omega in this room, marry her, and prove you can last 1 month without regretting it. King Ethan Blackwood watched her lips beneath the crystal chandeliers of the winter moon ball. Nearly 300 guests filled Blackwood Palace with conversation, laughter, and music, but to Ethan the grand ballroom existed in perfect silence. 12 years without hearing had taught him to read what other people missed: the hesitation before a lie, the curl of a mocking smile, the careless way someone turned away when they did not want a deaf king to understand. Ryan Cole stepped into Ethan's line of sight. Do not encourage her. Madison laughed and deliberately turned her face aside. Ethan could not catch her next words, but he understood the challenge in her expression. Pride answered before wisdom could. He set down his champagne glass. 30 days. Madison's eyebrows rose. Then choose. Ethan looked across the ballroom. Noble women in silver and midnight blue gowns gathered beneath the Blackwood banners, each surrounded by influential families. None interested him. Then a young woman in a plain forest green dress crossed the far side of the room carrying a worn wooden medicine case. Emily Carter, 23, Omega, healer at the Eastern Infirmary. No powerful family. No court influence. Almost invisible here. An elderly servant near the refreshment table dropped a folded handkerchief. Guests passed without noticing. Emily stopped. She picked it up, then noticed the woman's trembling fingers. Instead of continuing, Emily opened her medicine case, removed a small bottle, and quietly placed it in the servant's hand. She never looked toward the royal table to see whether anyone important had witnessed her kindness. Ethan did. Something about that made his decision unexpectedly easy. Her, he said. Ryan stared at him. Madison followed his gaze and smiled. Across the ballroom, Emily closed her medicine case, unaware that the king had just changed the course of her life because of a foolish wager. Then the eastern corridor door opened. A silver bell hanging above it swung beneath the carved wooden frame. Ethan heard nothing. He never did. But a sudden pressure tightened deep inside his left ear. His fingers rose instinctively beneath it. He waited for the familiar discomfort to fade. Royal physicians had called it a meaningless remnant of permanent damage. Ethan had stopped questioning them years ago. Emily had not. Nearly 40 feet away, she stopped walking. Her pale green eyes moved from the swinging bell to Ethan's hand. The expression on her face sharpened. Not fear. Not admiration. Recognition. Ethan slowly lowered his hand. Emily continued staring as the ballroom moved around her in glittering silence. Ethan gestured to 2 royal guards. They approached her and delivered his summons. Her face lost a little color, but when she looked toward him again, her attention returned to his left ear. She crossed the ballroom with measured steps and stopped before the royal table. Your Majesty. Ethan watched her lips. Emily glanced once at the bell behind her, then back at him. May I ask you something? He nodded. She took a quiet breath. If you cannot hear that bell, why did you react before you saw it move? Ethan became completely still. 12 years of celebrated physicians had explained why he could not hear. The unknown Omega standing before him was the first person who had asked why some part of him still could. Emily realized almost immediately that the Alpha King did not need louder words. He needed people to face him. Ethan's silver gray eyes stayed on her mouth as she spoke, following each movement with practiced precision. Around them, the winter moon ball continued beneath chandeliers and winter banners, but Emily felt as though the crowded ballroom had narrowed to the few feet between them. Does the bell cause pain? She asked. Ethan reached for a small writing pad beside his champagne glass. His handwriting was controlled and sharp. Sometimes. Emily looked toward the eastern corridor. The silver bell had stopped moving. Only that bell. Ethan wrote again. Other high vibrations. Sometimes doors. Crystal glasses. Certain instruments. Emily read the answer carefully. Madison shifted impatiently beside him. He has been examined by the finest physicians in the Northern Territories. Emily heard the warning hidden beneath the polished tone. Ethan did not react because Madison had turned partly away while speaking. Emily could have repeated the insult. She chose not to. Instead, she faced Ethan. How long have you been deaf? His pencil paused before moving. 12 years. Were you born that way? The pause lasted longer. No. Something cold moved through Emily's thoughts. She kept her expression calm. Then your hearing disappeared suddenly? Ethan nodded once. Ryan watched her now with the careful attention of someone who had expected an awkward conversation and found himself witnessing something else entirely. Emily glanced at the corridor door. Would you allow me to test one thing? Ethan studied her face, then nodded. Emily asked a nearby attendant to open the eastern door gently. The bell swung. Its clear chime passed through the ballroom noise. Ethan's fingers tightened around the pencil before his eyes moved toward the doorway. Emily's pulse quickened. Again, she said. The attendant closed the door and opened it once more. The bell chimed. Ethan's left shoulder stiffened. His hand rose halfway toward his ear. This time Emily was certain. He had reacted before seeing the bell. You felt that? Ethan wrote. Pressure. Where? He touched just beneath his left ear. Emily stepped closer but kept a respectful distance. Your physicians believe the hearing loss is permanent. He nodded. Did they explain why vibration still causes pressure? Ethan wrote, residual nerve damage. Emily considered the answer. It was possible, but possibility was not certainty, and his body was behaving like a locked door with something still moving behind it. Madison gave a small laugh. Surely an infirmary Omega is not about to overturn 12 years of royal medicine. This time she faced Ethan while speaking. He read every word. The temperature in his expression seemed to drop. Emily felt embarrassment burn beneath her skin, but she refused to defend her status. She may be right, Emily said. Ethan's eyebrows lifted. Madison looked almost disappointed. Emily continued, I may find nothing, but that does not make the question foolish. Ethan stared at her for a long moment. Most people around him offered certainty because certainty pleased kings. Emily offered uncertainty without apology. He wrote, What question? She looked directly into his eyes. If your hearing is gone, why is something inside you still responding? Ethan read her lips twice. Then the corridor bell moved again as another servant passed through the door. Pressure flashed across his face. Emily saw it. So did Ryan. Ethan slowly touched his left ear, and for the first time in 12 years, the familiar discomfort no longer felt meaningless. It felt like evidence. By the time the winter moon ball ended, Emily had learned two things about King Ethan Blackwood. He noticed far more than people believed, and he disliked being given answers that sounded rehearsed. Shortly after midnight, Ryan escorted her from the ballroom into a private receiving room overlooking the snow-covered palace grounds. Ethan waited beside a tall window, still dressed in formal black and silver. Madison stood near the fireplace with a champagne glass in her hand. Emily expected questions about his ear. Instead, Ethan handed her a page containing 5 words. I want you to marry me. Emily stared at the sentence, then at him. You barely know me. Ethan wrote, That can change. Madison lowered her glass to hide a smile. Ryan looked toward the fire. Emily noticed both reactions. Why me? Ethan's pencil paused. You noticed what others ignored. True, Emily thought, but incomplete. She could feel the missing truth sitting somewhere in the room. Is this because I am a healer? Ethan wrote, Partly. Political. No. Emily studied him. A king could have demanded obedience from almost anyone in the Northern Territories, yet Ethan simply waited. No threat, no command, no promise of luxury. Emily thought of the pressure in his left ear and the unanswered question that had followed her from the ballroom. If I agree, I continue working at the Eastern Infirmary. Ethan nodded immediately. My patients remain my responsibility. Another nod. And I decide what medical examinations I perform. Being your wife does not make me your physician unless you choose that separately. Something like approval crossed his face. He wrote, Agreed. Emily took a slow breath. Then I agree. The royal ceremony was arranged for the following evening beneath hundreds of white candles in Blackwood Hall. Emily wore an ivory gown without jewels. Whispers followed her along the aisle. Some nobles looked confused. Others looked offended that an ordinary Omega healer had been placed beside their Alpha King. Emily kept her chin level. Ethan stood beneath the royal crest, watching her approach through a world that remained completely silent. During the vows, Emily faced him directly so he could read every word. When guests shifted between Ethan and the officiant, she quietly repeated the missed sentences. No one had asked her to. Ethan noticed. Afterward, applause filled the hall. He saw hands meeting but heard nothing. Emily smiled at him, and for one brief moment, his guarded expression softened. Then she noticed Madison across the reception hall. Madison raised her champagne glass toward Ryan with a satisfied look. Ryan did not return the gesture. His jaw tightened. Madison silently formed 2 words. Emily had spent enough time around Ethan that evening to pay attention to lips. 30 days. Her smile faded. She looked at Ethan. He was watching her, unaware of what she had just understood. The sudden proposal. Madison's amusement. Ryan's discomfort. 30 days. Pieces without an answer. Emily could have confronted him immediately. Instead, she let the silence remain. Patience sometimes revealed more when they did not know what you had already noticed. She turned back toward the celebration and rested one hand lightly against her medicine case, which she had refused to leave behind even on her wedding night. Somewhere inside Blackwood Palace, a clock struck midnight. Ethan could not hear it. Emily could, and as the final chime faded, she realized there were now 2 mysteries inside her marriage. What had stolen the Alpha King's hearing, and what exactly would happen when 30 days ran out. For the first 6 days of their marriage, Emily learned Ethan through the things silence had taught him to do. He noticed footsteps by watching shadows move beneath doors. He knew someone had entered a room when candle flames shifted. At breakfast, he positioned his chair where he could see every face at the table, and when council members spoke carelessly while looking down at documents, Ryan repeated the important words where Ethan could read them. Emily never raised her voice for him. She simply faced him. That small difference seemed to matter. Their conversations soon migrated onto scraps of paper left beside coffee cups, medical journals, and council reports. One morning Ethan wrote, 3 hours discussing winter grain. I may surrender the crown and become a shepherd. Emily wrote beneath it, the sheep deserve a vote. When the paper returned, Ethan had added, you have already corrupted my kingdom. Emily smiled before remembering he could not hear her laugh. The thought left an unexpected ache. She still had not asked about 30 days. Every time she considered it, another small piece of Ethan contradicted the cruel explanation she feared. He protected her hours at the infirmary. He never treated her Omega status as weakness. When nobles interrupted her, he waited for her to finish. Yet the unanswered question remained. On the 7th night, Emily returned from the Eastern Infirmary shortly after 2 in the morning and found Ethan alone in the connecting sitting room. Snowlight spilled through the tall windows. His eyes were closed, one hand pressed beneath his left ear. Emily approached from the front, allowing her shadow to enter his vision first. Ethan immediately lowered his hand. Do not hide it, she said. He reached for the notebook on the side table. It passes. That does not mean it is meaningless. Ethan washed her lips, then wrote, you sound disappointed in me. Emily almost smiled. I am disappointed in anyone who thinks being accustomed to pain makes it normal. His expression softened, but she remained focused. How often does this happen? Several nights, each week. May I examine you? Ethan hesitated only briefly before nodding. Emily retrieved her worn medicine case and placed a small lamp beside him. She checked the outside of his left ear first. Nothing unusual. No visible irritation. She removed a narrow brass viewing instrument, warmed it between her palms, and showed it to him before moving closer. If anything feels different, raise your hand. Ethan nodded. Emily angled the lamp carefully and looked inside. At first she saw nothing that explained 12 years of silence. She adjusted the light. A faint reflection appeared, then vanished. Emily stopped. Ethan immediately noticed the change in her face. She repositioned the lamp and looked again. There, deep inside, beyond where ordinary light easily reached, something dark caught the glow. A narrow silver edge flashed beside it. Emily's heartbeat quickened. She changed the angle once more. The reflection remained. Ethan reached for the notebook. What? Emily did not answer immediately. She checked a third time because curiosity was not evidence, and fear was even less useful. The same dark shape waited beneath the silver glimmer. She slowly lowered the instrument. Ethan wrote, Did you find something? Emily met his eyes. I found something I cannot explain yet. His jaw tightened. Damage? She shook her head. I do not know. She refused to give him either hope or fear before she had earned the right. Then she looked back toward his left ear, remembering every bell, every vibration, every unexplained pressure. Whatever she had just seen did not look like the scarred remains of an old injury. It looked like something that did not belong there. Emily did not sleep after finding the dark shape. She remained at her desk until the candles burned low, replaying the examination in her mind and refusing to name what she had seen before evidence gave it a name. Near dawn, she returned to the sitting room and found Ethan already awake, reading council papers beside the cold fireplace. He looked at her face and immediately reached for his notebook. "You found something." Emily sat across from him. "I found something unusual. That is not the same as understanding it." Ethan waited. "Were you born deaf?" she asked. His pencil moved. "No." "How old were you when you lost your hearing?" 19. Emily calculated silently. 12 years. Was it gradual? Ethan's expression changed. He looked toward the window before writing again. "No. I could hear normally one night. The next morning, I could hear nothing." Emily felt cold despite the warmth of the room. "What happened the night before?" Ethan wrote more slowly this time. "My succession ceremony." He explained that the Blackwood heir traditionally entered a private ceremonial chamber before assuming greater royal responsibilities. He remembered candles, incense, silver bells, and the voices of senior members of the pack. He remembered leaving tired but otherwise well. Then morning had arrived without sound. "Both ears?" Emily asked. Ethan nodded. "Pain?" He touched his left ear. "Only here. Severe at first. Less frequent now." "Who examined you?" The answer came immediately. Dr. Victor Hale. Emily recognized the name. Victor had served the Blackwood royal family for decades and carried more authority than most healers could earn in a lifetime. "What did he diagnose?" Ethan wrote, "Permanent auditory damage." Emily looked at the words. "What caused it?" Ethan paused. "Unknown." That answer bothered her more than the diagnosis. She stood. "I need your original medical records." Ethan studied her before writing an authorization without asking why. Emily returned to her room, but instead of preparing for the archive, she opened an old cedar trunk she had brought from her childhood home. Inside were her mother's belongings, dried lavender, faded letters, and several leather medical journals filled with remedies and observations about wolf physiology. Emily turned pages quickly at first, then more slowly as unfamiliar sketches appeared. Halfway through the third journal, her fingers stopped. A narrow object had been drawn in dark ink, black through the center with a thin silver edge. Emily brought the journal closer to the window. It looked almost exactly like the glimmer inside Ethan's left ear. Beneath the drawing, her mother had written a name, Silverwake Sensory Thorn. Emily read every line that followed. Silverwake was not described as something that destroyed a wolf's senses. It suppressed them, interfering with the natural sensory pathways of powerful bloodlines. In rare cases, one properly placed thorn could silence an entire sense even when positioned on only one side. The notes mentioned pressure, sensitivity to vibration, and prolonged suppression when the object remained undisturbed. Emily's heartbeat accelerated. She forced herself to keep reading. Her mother had underlined one warning twice. Removal without understanding the bond could cause severe disorientation, and no healer should attempt it without confirming the object first. Emily closed her eyes. She had wanted an explanation. Now she had something far more dangerous, a possibility. Ethan might not have lost his hearing because his body failed him. The silence that had followed him for 12 years might have been imposed upon him. And if the object inside his ear truly was Silverwake, then someone had placed it there. Emily entered the Royal Archive shortly after sunrise, carrying her mother's journal beneath one arm and Ethan's written authorization in the other. Within minutes, 3 heavy boxes containing 12 years of medical records covered the long oak table. She began with the oldest file. The first report was dated the morning after Ethan's succession ceremony. Complete hearing loss. Severe pressure in the left ear. Intermittent dizziness. No visible external injury. Dr. Victor Hale's signature appeared beneath every observation. Emily turned the page. 3 days later, the symptoms remained. 1 week later, unchanged. By the end of the first month, Victor's wording shifted from unexplained sensory loss to permanent auditory damage. Yet Emily found no examination proving why the condition had suddenly become permanent. Later physicians had simply repeated his conclusion until repetition became certainty. By noon, Emily carried the earliest records and her mother's journal into the Royal Medical Council chamber. Ethan sat at the head of the long table. Ryan stood nearby. 6 senior healers occupied the remaining seats. Victor Hale arrived last, his white hair neatly combed, his dark blue coat immaculate. His expression remained politely indifferent until Emily placed the journal beside Ethan's records. "I believe the original diagnosis should be reconsidered," Emily said, positioning herself where Ethan could read her lips. Victor gave a restrained smile. "On what basis?" Emily opened the first report. His Majesty lost hearing in both ears overnight, yet persistent pressure developed only in the left. Certain vibrations still trigger that pressure. During my examination, I observed a dark object with a reflective silver edge inside the left ear. Several healers exchanged glances. Victor did not move. "Reflections can be misleading," he said. Emily opened her mother's journal to the drawing, "which is why I have not called it proof." Victor's eyes touched the page for less than a second. That second was enough. His fingers tightened against the back of his chair. Emily continued, "This journal describes a silverwake sensory thorn. The recorded effects include sensory suppression, sensitivity to vibration, and prolonged interference in wolves with powerful bloodlines." Victor's expression hardened. "Your mother's theories were never accepted by the Royal Medical Council." Heat rose beneath Emily's skin, but she kept her voice even. "Her reputation does not change what is inside the king's ear." Victor turned toward Ethan. "Your Majesty, this Omega has been inside the palace for barely a week. She is asking you to question 12 years of royal medicine." Ryan repeated the words from an angle Ethan could see. Emily watched Ethan's eyes move from Ryan to Victor. She could have defended herself. Instead, she faced Ethan. "I could be wrong." The room became still. Victor blinked. Emily placed both hands lightly on the table. "If I am wrong, another careful examination costs us an hour. If everyone else was wrong, you have already lost 12 years. Ethan stared at her. No promise of healing. No dramatic certainty. Only a question that had been neglected for too long. Victor stepped forward. "There is no reason to pursue this. Too fast. Too absolute." Emily saw Ryan notice it. Ethan noticed it too. He reached for his writing pad and pushed the message toward Ryan. Ryan read it aloud. "There is one reason. I want the truth." Victor went completely still. Ethan looked directly at Emily and wrote again. "Examine me." Emily nodded, but her attention remained on Victor. Until that moment, she had believed he was defending an old diagnosis. Now, watching the color slowly leave his face, she began to wonder whether he was defending something else. The council chamber emptied slowly, but Victor Hale was the last person Emily watched leave. He did not look back at Ethan. He looked at her mother's journal. That bothered her more. When the doors finally closed, only Emily, Ethan, and Ryan remained beneath the cold afternoon light. Ethan reached for his writing pad. "You believe Victor knows something." Emily read the sentence and chose her answer carefully. "I believe he reacted to the possibility of silverwake before we proved anything. That is not evidence, but it is worth remembering." Ethan nodded. She appreciated that he did not ask her to turn suspicion into certainty. "Before I examine you again, there is something more important than Victor." Ethan raised an eyebrow. Emily placed the journal in front of him. "You." His expression shifted. She pointed to the passage describing prolonged sensory suppression. "Finding something inside your ear does not mean I can safely remove it. If it is silverwake, it may have adapted to your alpha energy over 12 years. Moving it without understanding that connection could cause severe disorientation or changes in how your other senses respond." Ethan read every line. Then he wrote, "Could my hearing become worse?" Emily almost smiled at the bitter irony, but his face stopped her. "I do not know. It could change nothing. It could create new problems. It could also prove that what happened to you was never natural. I cannot promise which answer we will get." Ryan remained silent near the windows. Ethan looked toward the snow outside, where servants crossed the courtyard carrying bundles of firewood. For 12 years, people had told him what his silence meant. Permanent. Finished. Beyond question. Emily refused to replace one certainty with another. He wrote, "What do you want me to do?" She shook her head. "Nothing I want matters here." Ethan frowned. Emily moved into his direct line of sight. "This is your body, your hearing, your risk. I will explain everything I know and everything I do not know. Then you decide." Something in Ethan's face became unexpectedly vulnerable. "Even if I decide to stop? Especially then." He stared at her for several seconds. Emily wondered how many people had mistaken obedience to a king for respect. Real respect, she thought, sometimes meant allowing him to say no. Ethan looked down at the journal again. His pencil moved slowly. I want the truth. Emily felt her heartbeat tighten. Then we proceed carefully. That afternoon, she prepared a private examination room in the Eastern Infirmary. Ethan sat beneath the brightest lamp while Ryan remained nearby as witness. Emily approached from the front and showed Ethan every instrument before using it. Raise your hand if the pressure changes. He nodded. She angled the brass viewer into his left ear. Darkness. A slight adjustment. Then the silver glimmer appeared. Emily held her breath and changed the angle by a fraction. This time the object remained visible. It was narrow, dark through the center, silver along one edge, exactly like the drawing in her mother's journal. More disturbing was the faint shimmer surrounding it, pulsing almost imperceptibly in rhythm with Ethan's alpha energy. Emily lowered the instrument. Ethan immediately reached for the notebook. Is it there? She met his eyes. Yes. His fingers became still. Silverwake. Emily looked once more before answering. It matches the description, but I want to confirm every detail before naming it with certainty. Ethan nodded, accepting caution when hope would have been easier. Emily turned another page in her mother's journal and found a note she had overlooked that morning. A silverwake thorn bound to a royal bloodline could resist removal until its energetic connection was weakened. She looked at Ethan again. The object was not merely lodged inside his ear. After 12 years, it had become attached to the very power that made him an alpha king. Emily spent the next morning studying every line her mother had written about Silverwake, searching for a safe path between caution and possibility. By noon, 3 facts were clear. The thorn could not simply be pulled free. Brass could interact with its energy without strengthening it. And low, controlled vibration might gradually weaken the bond it had formed with a royal wolf's sensory pathway. None of that guaranteed success. When Ethan entered the Eastern Infirmary that afternoon, Emily had arranged her mother's journal, the brass viewer, and several simple instruments across a clean wooden table. Ryan remained near the door. Ethan sat opposite her and immediately noticed how carefully everything had been prepared. There is a method described here, Emily said, keeping her face toward him. But before you decide anything, you need to know that I have never performed it. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. He wrote, Has anyone? Not anyone I can find. He looked down at the journal. Comforting. Emily caught the dry humor in his expression. You asked for truth, not comfort. A faint smile appeared, then vanished as he wrote again. What happens if it works? Emily rested her fingers beside the journal. The bond should weaken enough for the thorn to move without resisting your alpha energy. After that, we reassess. We do not remove anything simply because we can reach it. And if it does not work, we stop. Ethan wrote another question. And if my hearing never returns? Emily looked directly into his eyes. Then you will still know that we searched honestly. Something about the answer made him become very still. Emily had expected disappointment. Instead, she saw relief. Not because she had promised him a miracle, but because she had refused to sell him one. Ethan looked toward the tall infirmary windows. Snow drifted beyond the glass. He had spent 12 years watching storms he could not hear, fireplaces he could not hear, people laughing at tables he could not hear. Then his gaze returned to her. If you were me, would you try? Emily considered the question. I would want to know whether the silence belonged to me or whether someone put it there. Ethan's jaw tightened. But, she continued, I am not you. The decision remains yours. For several seconds, only Ryan could hear the clock on the wall. Ethan finally picked up his pencil. Proceed. Emily nodded. She positioned the lamp and began with the gentlest vibration described in the journal, transmitted through a brass instrument held near the thorn without forcing contact. Ethan's fingers tightened against the chair. Emily stopped immediately. Pressure. He nodded. Pain. He shook his head. She waited until his shoulders relaxed, then continued. The faint silver shimmer around the thorn pulsed once, then weakened. Emily leaned closer. Another controlled vibration. Another pause. The shimmer grew thinner. Her pulse accelerated, but her hands remained steady. After several minutes, she lowered the instrument. That is enough for today. Ethan looked surprised. He wrote, It is changing. Yes. Then why stop? Emily closed the journal. Because progress is not permission to become careless. Ethan stared at her, and something warmer entered his expression. He wrote slowly this time. Everyone around me has spent years telling me what they thought a king wanted to hear. Emily waited. His pencil moved again. You are the first person who seems more afraid of misleading me than disappointing me. Her throat tightened. The hidden meaning of 30 days suddenly returned to her, sharper than before. Ethan still owed her a truth of his own, though he did not know she was waiting for it. He turned the page and wrote 3 words. I trust you. Emily read them twice. She wanted to feel only warmth. Instead, trust felt like something fragile placed directly into her hands. She closed his notebook gently. Then I will never use it to make your choices for you. Ethan held her gaze, unaware that the promise had drawn an invisible line between them, one that his own secret was already standing on the wrong side of. By the 4th treatment, the silver shimmer around the thorn had faded to a thin line. Emily should have felt relieved. Instead, the closer they came to freeing it, the more carefully she watched everything around Ethan. The Eastern Infirmary had been restricted to 3 people during treatment: Emily, Ethan, and Ryan. Yet that afternoon, Dr. Victor Hale appeared outside the examination room before they began. The council requested an observation, he said. Emily knew of no such request. Ryan checked the written schedule and confirmed it with a small shake of his head. Ethan watched their faces. Emily stepped where he could see her clearly. Dr. Hale wishes to observe. Ethan considered it, then wrote, Let him. Victor entered. Emily returned to the table and showed Ethan each instrument exactly as she had before. The bond is weaker today, she explained. I may be able to expose more of the object, but if anything changes unexpectedly, we stop. Ethan nodded. Emily began with the low vibration. The thorn responded almost immediately. Its silver edge became clearer beneath the lamplight. Ethan raised one finger. Emily stopped. Pressure. He nodded. Pain. He shook his head. After a minute, he signaled that she could continue. Victor remained near the wall, outwardly calm, but Emily noticed his attention never left her hands. She applied another brief vibration. The shimmer weakened. Then the dark object shifted by the smallest visible amount. Emily's breath caught. Ryan leaned forward. Ethan saw the reaction and reached for his notebook. What happened? It moved, Emily said. Hope flashed across his face before he controlled it. She lifted one hand. That is progress. Nothing more yet. Ethan nodded. Emily changed the lamp angle and examined the newly exposed section. More silver had appeared, perhaps 1/8 of an inch. At first she saw only tarnished metal. Then the light caught several tiny lines carved into its surface. Not scratches. Deliberate marks. Emily adjusted the lamp. A curved shape emerged, followed by 3 tiny points beneath it. Her heartbeat quickened. She had seen heraldic engravings in palace records, but this one was too small to identify from the exposed section. Victor took one step forward. Stop. Emily looked up. His composure had disappeared. Why? She asked. Victor's eyes remained fixed on the thorn. You have proven an object is present. Further manipulation is unnecessary. Emily did not touch the instrument. You argued yesterday that there might be no object at all. Victor's mouth tightened. Ethan looked between them, unable to hear the exchange while Victor's face remained turned away. Ryan moved into Ethan's view and repeated it. Ethan's expression hardened. Victor finally faced the king. Your Majesty, this procedure has gone far enough. Ethan read his lips, then wrote something and held it up. Why? Victor hesitated. 1 second. 2. Because the risk is increasing. Emily looked back through the viewer. The thorn had not changed. Ethan's breathing remained steady. Nothing in her mother's notes suggested a new danger at this stage. Then she saw Victor's reflection in the polished metal tray. He was not watching Ethan. He was staring at the engraving. Emily understood. You recognize the mark. Victor's face went pale. Ryan became completely still. Ethan read Emily's lips and slowly turned toward Victor. The physician recovered quickly. I recognize nothing. Emily lowered the viewer. She would not continue while suspicion had changed the room. Ethan wrote, Are we stopping? For today, she said. Your safety comes before my curiosity. She covered the instruments, then carefully enlarged a hand-drawn copy of the visible engraving in her notes. 1 curved crest, 3 pointed stars, and the beginning of what looked like a crowned wolf. Victor watched the pencil move across the page. His hand tightened around the back of a chair. Emily had not yet identified the symbol. She did not need to. Victor Hale already knew exactly what it meant. The next morning, Emily found the symbol in a restricted heraldry ledger beneath a century of Blackwood family records. A crowned wolf above 3 winter stars. Wintermere. The name belonged to a distant branch of the royal bloodline that had challenged Ethan's succession years earlier. She stared at the page until the implications became impossible to ignore. The thorn inside Ethan had not been random. Someone had marked it. Someone had expected it to remain hidden. By evening, Ethan sat beneath the bright lamp in the Eastern Infirmary while Ryan stood nearby, and 2 senior healers observed as independent witnesses. Victor had not been invited. Emily placed her mother's journal beside the instruments and faced Ethan. The bond is weak enough that the object may release today. His eyes remained fixed on her lips. May, she repeated. I will stop the moment your condition changes. Ethan wrote, I understand. Emily hesitated. There is something else. I identified the engraving. His pencil stopped. What is it? Wintermere. Ethan's face became unreadable. He knew the name. Emily could see that immediately. After several seconds, he wrote, Continue. She shook her head. Only if that is still your choice after hearing what I just told you. His gaze softened slightly at the reminder. Then he wrote again. It is. Emily began with the same controlled vibration they had used during previous sessions. The remaining silver shimmer weakened until it was almost invisible. Ethan lifted one hand once, signaling pressure, and Emily stopped until he lowered it again. She resumed. The dark object shifted. Another fraction of an inch appeared. Emily kept her breathing slow. Progress was not permission to rush. She adjusted the brass instrument, waited, then applied one final gentle vibration. Something changed. The resistance vanished. The silverwake thorn came free without force and dropped onto the silver tray. A tiny metallic sound filled the room. Ethan's entire body went still. Emily froze. His eyes widened. He looked down at the tray, then toward Ryan, then toward the fireplace. A log settled behind the grate. Ethan's lips parted. His hand gripped the arm of the chair. Emily immediately stepped into his view. Are you dizzy? He did not answer. Rain began tapping against the tall windows. Ethan turned toward it. His expression changed so completely that Emily felt her throat tighten. He was listening, not reading, listening. His eyes moved toward the fire again, as though every small sound demanded to be discovered. Ryan whispered his name. Ethan turned sharply toward him. Ryan covered his mouth, overwhelmed. Emily's eyes burned, but she forced herself to remain calm. Ethan. She had spoken softly. She had also stepped deliberately to his left, outside the angle he normally used to read her lips. Ethan turned toward her voice. For 12 years, silence had been the only world he knew. Now he looked at Emily as though her single word had crossed an impossible distance to reach him. Emily, he said, his own voice unfamiliar to his ears. She smiled through the sudden sting in her eyes. Then Ethan flinched at the overwhelming layers of sound. Emily immediately dimmed the room, asked everyone to remain quiet, and gave him time to adjust. Only when his breathing steadied did she look at the tray. The silverwake thorn lay beneath the lamp, fully exposed for the first time. The engraving was clearer now. The crowned wolf, 3 winter stars, and beneath them a second mark Emily had not been able to see while the thorn was inside his ear. Ryan leaned closer. His face lost its color. Ethan followed his gaze. Emily opened the heraldry ledger beside the tray. The second mark was not Wintermere. It was the personal medical seal of the physician assigned to Ethan on the night of his succession. Dr. Victor Hale. The first thing Ethan asked for after 12 years of silence was not music. It was the truth. By morning, the silverwake thorn rested inside a sealed glass evidence case beneath constant guard, while copies of Ethan's oldest medical records covered the royal council table. Every sound still seemed too sharp to him. The scratch of a pen made his eyes flick sideways. Footsteps in the corridor pulled his attention toward the doors. Even the quiet crackle of the fireplace sometimes made his shoulders tense. Emily remained close enough to help, but never spoke without warning. When he needed silence, she gave it to him. When he wanted an answer, she did not soften it. Ryan entered carrying 3 archive ledgers. We found the succession records, he said. Ethan looked up immediately, still surprised by how a voice could reveal direction before he saw a face. Emily opened the first ledger. Victor Hale's name appeared beside the medical preparations for Ethan's succession ceremony. The second contained an authorization for a sealed Windermere package delivered to the ceremonial chamber that same evening. The third listed Lord Marcus Blackwood, senior representative of the Windermere branch, among the few men permitted inside. Ethan read the entries twice. "Bring Victor here," he said. His voice sounded strange to him, deeper than he remembered from 19, but steady. Victor entered less than an hour later with 2 council witnesses. His composure lasted until Ryan placed the sealed thorn on the table. Ethan did not raise his voice. "Tell me what happened." Victor looked toward the evidence case. "I treated you after your hearing failed." "That is not what I asked." The room became painfully quiet. Emily watched Victor's fingers tighten around the edge of his coat. At last, he sat down. 12 years earlier, Windermere had feared Ethan would unite several divided territories and permanently end their claim to succession. Lord Marcus had obtained silverwake through an old network of private healers. The original intention, Victor admitted, had been to weaken Ethan's heightened senses during the succession period and create doubt about his fitness to rule. Victor had allowed the thorn to be introduced during the private ceremony. He claimed he had expected the effects to fade. They had not. When Ethan woke unable to hear, Victor panicked. Removing the thorn would have exposed what had been done, so he declared the damage permanent and spent 12 years protecting the lie. Ethan listened without moving. Emily could only imagine the cruelty of hearing the explanation for 12 stolen years with ears that had been restored less than a day earlier. "You knew it might be reversible," Ethan said. Victor lowered his eyes. That was answer enough. Ryan looked furious, but Ethan lifted one hand. "No one touches him." Then he turned toward the council witnesses. "There will be a lawful inquiry. Every record will be preserved. Every person involved will be questioned. No punishment will be decided before the evidence is complete." Emily felt something loosen inside her chest. Ethan had every reason to let anger rule the room. Instead, he chose justice. Victor was escorted away without resistance. For several seconds, Ethan said nothing. Then rain began against the windows. He turned toward the sound, and Emily saw grief pass across his face. 12 years, he whispered. She stood beside him without pretending there was a sentence capable of repairing that loss. Eventually, he looked at her. "You gave me the choice they took from me." Emily's breath caught. The words landed harder than he understood. 30 days. Madison's silent smile returned to her memory. The wager still stood between them, invisible and unresolved. Ethan reached for her hand, then stopped before touching it, waiting. Emily slowly placed her fingers in his. For one brief moment, she allowed herself to believe the truth had finally entered every corner of Blackwood Palace. Then the council chamber doors opened. Madison Reed stood there, pale and unusually serious. Her eyes moved from Ethan to Emily. "Before everyone celebrates," she said quietly, "there is something his wife deserves to know about why he married her." Madison's words seemed louder than anything Ethan had heard since his hearing returned. Emily slowly withdrew her hand from his. She had imagined this moment for days, but imagination had been kinder than reality. Ethan looked at Madison, and the sudden tension in his face answered Emily before anyone spoke again. "Tell her," Madison said. Ethan's eyes closed briefly. "Emily." Hearing him say her name should have meant something beautiful. Instead, she remembered the reception, Madison lifting her glass, and those two silent words. 30 days. Was our marriage a wager? Emily asked. Ethan did not look away. It began as one. Ryan lowered his gaze. Emily felt strangely calm. Perhaps the truth hurt differently when part of you had already been waiting for it. What were the terms? Ethan hesitated. Madison challenged me to choose an Omega at the ball, marry her, and remain married for 30 days without regretting the decision. Emily looked toward Madison. And he chose me. Madison nodded. Yes. The council chamber seemed to shrink around her. Emily remembered Ethan watching her across the ballroom, his sudden proposal, the ceremony arranged within a day. She had mistaken speed for certainty. Now every memory had another meaning beneath it. Ethan stepped forward, then stopped when Emily moved back. He respected the distance. But that almost made it worse. What happened after that night was not a wager, he said. My trust in you is real. What I feel for you is real. Emily believed him. That was the cruelest part. When were you going to tell me? Ethan had no answer ready. She waited. He had spent 12 years surrounded by people who offered convenient explanations. She would not accept one now. I should have told you before the ceremony, he finally said. Yes. I was ashamed. That explains your silence. It does not excuse it. Ethan lowered his head. Emily's fingers found the wedding ring on her hand. Only hours earlier, she had watched him learn that Victor had hidden the truth because revealing it would expose his own wrongdoing. Now Ethan stood before her carrying a smaller betrayal built from the same choice. Hide the truth. Let someone else live inside the consequences. You told me today that I gave you the choice they took from you, Emily said. Ethan became still. Every time I examined you, I told you what I knew. I told you what I did not know. I told you the risks. I even told you that you could walk away. Her voice trembled once, then steadied. Because it was your life. You deserve to choose. Ethan's face changed as he understood where her words were going. Emily removed the ring. She did not throw it. She placed it gently on the council table between them. The small sound of metal against wood made Ethan flinch. A week ago, he could not have heard it. Now he heard every detail. You never gave me the same choice, she said. Ethan looked at the ring. Emily, I am sorry. She believed that too. But remorse did not rewrite consent. I know. Madison shifted near the doorway, her earlier certainty gone. Emily picked up her mother's journal and medicine case. Ethan did not command her to stay. He did not reach for her. He simply stood there while she walked toward the doors. At the threshold, Emily paused and looked back. The Alpha King who could command an entire territory seemed suddenly powerless before one quiet decision he had no right to overrule. Do not come after me tonight, she said. Ethan swallowed. I will not. Emily nodded and left. Her footsteps traveled down the stone corridor, each one clear to ears she had helped restore. Ethan remained beside the council table until the sound disappeared completely. For 12 years, silence had been forced upon him. This silence was different. This one had been earned. 3 weeks passed before Ethan entered the Eastern Infirmary again. Emily had returned to the life she understood. Morning rounds, handwritten patient notes, herbal bottles lined along wooden shelves, and quiet conversations with people who needed care more than promises. She heard news from the palace without asking for it. The Royal Council opened a lawful investigation into Victor Hale and the Wintermere conspiracy. Ethan ordered every medical record preserved and every witness questioned. Then he did something Emily had not expected. Before the full council, he publicly admitted that his marriage to her had begun with a wager. He blamed neither Madison nor Pride nor the strange circumstances of that night. He called the decision his own. He also declared that Emily owed the crown nothing, and that no royal privilege would be used to influence whether she remained married to him. Emily read the official statement once, folded it, and returned to work. Accountability mattered. It was not the same as forgiveness. On a quiet winter afternoon, she stood beside the infirmary window arranging dried lavender when footsteps stopped outside the open doorway. She knew those footsteps now. Ethan remained in the hall. No guards. No council members. No royal announcement. Just a tall man in a simple black coat waiting where she could see him. May I come in? He asked. Emily looked at him for several seconds. Once, he had asked her to marry him before giving her the truth. Now he would not cross a doorway without permission. Yes. Ethan entered and stopped several feet away. Snow drifted beyond the windows. Somewhere behind Emily, water simmered softly in a kettle. Ethan glanced toward the sound, and a faint wonder still crossed his face. He had been hearing for 3 weeks, yet ordinary noises continued to surprise him. Emily understood that some miracles became quieter without becoming smaller. I did not come to ask you to return, he said. Then why are you here? Ethan breathed in slowly. To tell you that you were right. Emily waited. I thought regret meant feeling terrible about what I did. It does not. Regret means understanding that being sorry does not give me the right to decide what happens next. Her fingers tightened slightly around the lavender stems. Ethan continued. I love you. That is true, but it is not a claim on you. The words settled between them. He did not move closer. If you never choose me again, I will still be grateful that you gave me back something I thought was gone forever. Emily looked toward the window. I did not give you your hearing, Ethan. I helped you find what had been taken. A small smile touched his face. You always were particular about the truth. Someone has to be. This time she heard him laugh. The sound startled them both. Ethan looked almost embarrassed, and despite herself, Emily smiled. It was the first unguarded moment they had shared since she left. She set the lavender down. I cannot return to what we had. His expression tightened, but he nodded. I understand. Because what we had began with a lie. Yes. Emily stepped closer. If there is anything after this, it has to begin differently. Ethan looked at her, hope appearing carefully rather than triumphantly. How? Emily extended her hand between them. She made the choice before he could ask for it. With the truth. And slowly. Ethan looked at her hand, but did not take it immediately. Are you sure? Emily felt something inside her finally loosen. Yes. Only then did he place his hand in hers. Outside, snow fell over Blackwood Palace. Inside, there were no witnesses, no wager, no royal ceremony, and no promise that trust would rebuild overnight. There was only an Omega who had been given every reason to walk away, and an Alpha King who had finally learned not to command her return. Ethan listened to the quiet rhythm of her breathing, the kettle behind them, and the winter wind against the glass. Of all the sounds restored to him, none mattered more than the answer Emily had been free to give. Power could command fear. Love had to earn the choice to stay.